Podcast number 11 here at Transfiguration in beautiful, idyllic Oakdale, Minnesota. It's actually really quite lovely today. Want to give you all a heads up. We have some workers up on the rooftop right now, all maintaining, of course, proper social distance. They're up there fixing. Boy, I don't think they're fixing a roof. I guess I'm pastor. I suppose I should know why they're up there. Anyways,
I have no clue. I hear banging, and sometimes it's louder than a goose, and I assume someone is on there for appropriate reasons.
Yeah, part of leadership is delegation. So I have delegated rough work to others. But delighted that you are with us, dear listener, and hope you've been enjoying this series. So grateful to Justin for his work to make this happen. At the end of our time today, we're going to give some shout outs to different folks who have assisted to make this possible, and just some generally good people in our parish who have really shown selfless service and a commitment to this community. You have heard, dear listener, in previous podcasts that Mr. Kortuem and I have been watching the Michael Jordan documentary, which I've really, really enjoyed. And of course, the last episode was shown on this past Sunday. I actually watched it yesterday. And I think it raises some interesting questions. It raises some interesting questions about leadership. One of my points in the show that I enjoyed the most, that's the wrong phrase, that I found most emotionally compelling, that's it, was when Jordan, MJ, is talking about the price of leadership. And of course, I think this is episode 6, I think, maybe, I don't know, 5, whatever. And he's being asked, you really pushed your teammates in a way that some would say was bullying, that you, in fact, maybe even to put sort of a kind of highfalutin spin on it, you violated their dignity to enforce the idea that we are pursuing something greater than an individual unit. And Jordan gets choked up. He actually begins to tear up, and he says, in so many words, this is the price of winning. The price of winning is you burn bridges. And again, I'm putting words into MJ's mouth here, but you've got to be a jerk if you are going to succeed in the highest level. And the guy's got 6 rings, and so it seems pretty compelling. And yet we are Christians, and that brings with it a whole different level of understanding of what leadership involves. I do think that if one is not a believer, if one doesn't believe in Jesus Christ, if one doesn't believe in the fundamental dignity of human beings, then probably MJ is right, unequivocally, although there are plenty of just plain old secular studies which would show that, being a jerk is not enough. Even if you're a real strong jerk, you got to have buy-in. But let's just assume for a second that he's right, that to be a great leader, to be not only what did Jordan play? Was he a forward? Was he a point guard?
Point guard. Shooting guard, point guard.
To be a great shooting guard, to be a great general, heck, to be a great pastor, or a president or whatever. That to do that, you've got to go full steam ahead and bring people along, even if it means literally kicking and screaming. But the Christian can't do that. The Christian must love. And that poses a whole different dynamic of leadership, doesn't it, Justin?
I completely agree. I don't mean to throw a wrench in everything, but I just want to get a little wax nostalgic here for a minute.
Yeah, wax away, wax on, wax off.
I was a kid. I think I've said this before in the podcast. I watched the most inspiring thing for me to go play basketball was Teen Wolf, the movie.
Yes, indeed.
I think I've said that before. However, watching a finals game or the NBA playoffs in the, because they're always in the spring and the summer.
That's right.
The court outside, basketball is a winter sport. However, I didn't have a gym at my house.
Yep.
So, I would have to, sometimes in the winter I would shovel and I would play with my mittens on because I was dedicated.
Yeah.
But
all
in the summer, the courts are nice. Sometimes the cars are not in the driveway and you can actually play. There's another story about that one.
Okay.
I got in some big trouble. But yeah, So I would watch the finals or watch the those Sunday games, those afternoon Sunday games. Yeah, the
I did the NFL tune, but yeah, it's oh gosh, I'm losing it.
Maybe that's ABC. I don't know. We're gonna get sued by all of them. No big deal. No one cares. They're not listening. Yeah, they're not listening, and all the other parishioners are like, we don't care about the Jordan stuff. However, when I was a kid, I kind of knew that Jordan talked a lot of smack. I kind of knew he was kind of a jerk. But, as a kid, it was like win at all costs. It doesn't really matter.
Yep.
The point of playing the game, you play to win the game, right?
Right.
Herm Edwards. Yeah. You play to win the game, And in the context of the game, that is the goal.
Yep.
And sometimes there's different context to everything we do. So, I took that and ran with it. I mean, so as a kid, I was a jerk. I was like, I want to be the best at everything I do.
Yeah.
I want to be the best basketball player. I want to be the best football player. I want to be the best track athlete, the best baseball player. Everything I did, I wanted to be the best. I honestly thought, and I think it's kind of a good thing, not being the best you can be was kind of a waste of time.
Sure.
Why just kind of lackadaisically do something? And we also had a huge kind of competitiveness at our house, which I think a lot of families, it's kind of weird. I think we're kind of moving away from it, but, back then in the 90s, people would brag about it, wow, we're super competitive. But a lot of times, let's be honest, that meant we had fights,
no, that's right.
We were mad at each other and we fought each other. And there's kind of a balance of competitiveness that, like you said, can beat down the person. Yeah,
no, that's right. And what overall of my watching of the Jordan documentary, I've been, Saturdays are real quiet days. Praise Almighty God. In this time of quarantine, it's kind of it sort of becomes the day of rest, I think, for most of the staff, myself included. And I've gone back to some philosophical texts that I've really enjoyed, some political philosophy, and there's some philosophers, modern philosophers, who have proposed that the ancient, so Plato, Aristotle, those dudes, we oftentimes think of them now as kind of our fundamental allies as Christians because Thomas involved them so much and kind of baptized them, and the Middle Ages rediscovered them. But these philosophers point out that there are many elements of the ancient Greeks that really are in fundamental opposition to the Christian way, specifically regarding where does virtue lie. And virtue is in this, as you say, this pursuit of excellence, this pursuit of greatness that is fundamentally about being the best. You are reaching out to being the best, and the accomplishment of great things. That's the measure of a full life. And the Christian comes at it a little bit differently. Certainly, we are striving for excellence, yes, but it's fundamentally moral excellence. It's fundamentally excellence of loving obedience to God. It's the little way. Saint Therese. I mean, would Saint Therese have made it on Michael Jordan's basketball team? I don't think so.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, there are certain aspects of it, like the episode 9 I thought was awesome with Steve Kerr.
Yes, indeed.
I didn't know his story with his dad.
Yeah.
I mean, that was crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, and it kind of shows his, where he's at now.
Impressive mom too. Holy cow.
Yeah, I mean, very intellectual family. You can see where he gets it. He's a smart coach. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
But he's a very different character in this whole, in this game. Now, then at the same time, he classically had a fight, a fist fight with Jordan too.
Exactly.
So it's like and
that's what sort of won Jordan's respect, that he was able to fight back.
Yeah, and then, but I did like that Kerr said, he regretted the fight itself. Mm-hmm. However, he was happy that it kind of happened.
Felix culpa.
And it just happens in sports. I mean, I've sorry to break it to you people. I've been in plenty of fights in the context of like a football practice.
Adrenaline
it just
running.
happens.
Yep.
People annoy the heck out of you.
Yep.
And they do certain things that you just kind of, I don't know if I guess I regret them in a way, but like there was never like ill will. It was just like,
and
okay, stop it. Like, get out of here.
And I got to say, I mean, anger, I think oftentimes, it's seen as a sort of a bad thing because it can make us uncomfortable, some of us, but it's not. I mean, anger is an emotion given to us by God that's meant to right wrongs. And I'm not saying that you were righting injustices on the football field.
No, they weren't.
But there is something good, fundamentally good about getting upset about injustice, because that anger will inspire action, will move us in a way that maybe we wouldn't necessarily do. So, I think some aggressiveness, some passion on the field or on the court. And here's where I think some of the tension comes in, because that I can see it, especially as a guy who's got like zero athletic ability. I can see that as something which is good, but like all, things, the virtues and the mean, isn't it? You have to weigh on the one side competitiveness and drive and desire for excellence in achieving a goal with human dignity, the virtues of compassion, love, humanity, Christian discipleship. It's there's a middle way there, isn't there?
Yeah, when after the fight, a lot of after any fight, after someone takes it too far in something else, what do they say? My passions got the best of me.
Amen, that's right.
And what, as a Catholic, some people kind of just realize that, whoa, there was something welling up within me that kind of took control, and I did things I didn't want to do.
Yep.
Maybe as St. Paul says, I don't know. But as a Catholic, we can see that, okay, so what actually happened there? My passions overpowered my desire to show you dignity. Mm-hmm. My passions overpowered the desire to love you. And we do this as parents. We do this as brothers and sisters, as sons and daughters, that sometimes our passions get the best of us. This is a beautiful, reason what we have reconciliation, and the reason why reconciliation is so powerful and can actually have an effect is I can go to that person later and say, I'm really sorry that my passions got the best of me. And if the person is reasonable, they might be able to look in the mirror and say, yeah, this has happened to me as well.
This is after they punch you in the face, right?
Yeah, no, okay. I mean, you've cooled down, okay. Your heart rate goes down. I mean, some of these things are like natural,
Absolutely, 100%.
This kind of fight or flight thing that sports naturally bring out, because you're doing things with your bodies that, in our nature, we're meant to be fighting for survival.
Yeah.
And we do these things, and sometimes this, animalistic nature for survival comes in, but then I think where we can go with this is like, sometimes it just overrules literally everything. You see Jordan before a game, like betting on, how close they can get the nickel to the wall,
right. Right.
And it takes over, like he talks about, Patrick Ewing still talks about how he still trash talks him. It's like, the game's over, bro. Like, you're not playing anymore. And this is where it's like, okay, we have to have virtue of this competitiveness can be a healthy thing. However, when it oversteps the bounds of the person's dignity, whoa, we've gone way too far. And so that's part of the competitiveness, but also with leadership too. I mean, a leader can do the same thing where they over desire the success of their company or what they think is best for that person, and they can really ride or bully or bulldoze, or what are the other things you can call them?
Yeah, I think here of also the passage from St. Paul, just mention real quickly about that drive. St. Paul speaks about run the race as to win. There is a use of this imagery of competitiveness that can be harnessed for something good. But yeah, it can also go crooked pretty quick, and because we struggle with passions within ourselves and insecurities, which is oftentimes, I think, connected to why leaders kind of go off the rail because they're insecure. Yeah, it's and I sort of a moment of disclosure here, and you've experienced this, Justin. I mean, part of my temperament, part of my own personality type is I'm not a big fan of conflict, and I because of that, I think I really admire those leaders who, from my perspective, kind of embrace it and sort of pursue it. I wonder if maybe those on the other side perhaps look on the other way and say, gosh, I wish I was a bit more understanding. I wish I was more compassionate. But there has to be a drive for excellence. I think as pastor, it's my responsibility to get the parishioners to heaven. I mean, that's a matter of life and death. And it's woefully inadequate and dereliction of duty if I just sit in my duff and say, you know what? I don't want to rile people up. I don't want to ruffle any feathers. Things are going basically okay right now, so let's not push anybody because that'll be really uncomfortable for me. That's a failure. That's a fundamental moral failure. However, if I take this drive for holiness, this desire for transfiguration to be as best as it can be, and I, as you say, begin to ride people, I disregard their dignity, I make fun of them in either explicit or implicit ways, I disregard them, then what does the devil come? The devil comes as an angel of light, and we can say, well, our goal is great. We're working towards a parish of saints. All of that's beautiful and good. But Father Erickson, you treat your staff like garbage, and the people of God have no access to you. That's a failure too. So it's all of this demands, final point, I promise, all this demands that the pastor, be a man of prayer, that he find his fundamental identity in union with Jesus, friendship with Christ, that he again be secure in himself, that he not take his own sense of worth from the feedback from others, which is a terrible thing to do. And then he's got to be comfortable with the fact that you work your tail off, and then the rest has got to be God's work. I think all of those are important for the pastor and for the Catholic leader.
Yeah, I liked in the document that the contrast they showed between Jordan and Phil Jackson.
Yeah.
Because Phil Jackson, now I don't want to sanctify Phil Jackson. He's got his own faults and ideas on life that are a little odd. Yeah, we don't get into them, but they're a little weird. But he did, in a way, get the best out of all of his athletes. I mean,
no question.
There's something, there was a couple things that I took from it, especially like his dealing with, Jordan, for one, but also his dealing with Dennis Rodman.
Yeah, that's right.
Which was really odd. I mean, by that time in his life, Dennis Rodman had a lot of wounds he was dealing with. And he was very skilled at this game of basketball. And even within the game of basketball, in a very particular skill set within the game, he was an incredible defender against big men or kind of post men, and kind of like just drove him crazy because of his energy and whatnot. And he was an amazing rebounder. Yeah. So he had this skill set that the Bulls needed. Jordan was also an incredible defender. But they needed this. They needed this kind of energy guy, this big guy, but Rodman was like all over the place. I mean, I think one of the craziest things, there was a couple of them where he requested to go to Vegas, in the middle of the season.
Wants a vacation.
And I'm like, what? And I was like totally with Jordan, like, no, why? What is this? This is ridiculous. And then Phil is like, just let him go. He needs to be him, and I'm not condoning that. However, it worked.
Yeah.
Phil did in a way. So that was one thing. He allowed the person to be themselves within the context of this game in order to allow them to utilize their skill set. And the second thing, I think Jordan said it in the last one, where Phil always preached the unity of the team. Like they had to be a part of this team together. And even his offense in general, the triangle offense, people ridiculed it at the beginning of it, and thought it was ridiculous.
11 championship rings later.
Yeah, exactly. But it shows like the unity, this cohesive unit, and when they're all working together and they're not as worried about the individual statistics or the plays, and it's not like this weave system where one person's just getting the shots all the time. It's just working with whatever the defense gives you. It was kind of interesting to see Phil's perspective on this team and especially in the NBA, where and this might be like a thing for pastors as well, is you got to deal with like these crazy egos. I mean, not saying, like church workers have crazy egos, but like we're working in a church where there's just a lot of different stuff. And I'm sure, I don't even see, the phone calls or messages you get, but I'm sure they're all over the place. And to kind of be able to say like with some wisdom, this is not helpful, or this is good, or this is not good. I can't even imagine, like being an NBA coach. Yeah. They're kind of like a social worker almost. They're like barely a coach. They're just like trying to get all these egos to work together. It was just kind of amazing.
No, it's true. I think of here the scene in the documentary where Scottie Pippen refuses to play because he can't be given the final shot, and the Bulls of course still win the game, but it was such a moral failure on the part of Scottie Pippen and a real disappointment of the team because they weren't working together as a team. But yeah, you're right. Trying to bring everybody together around this common cause, and here's where too I think the pastor, in a way that probably is similar in some ways to being a coach or other place. You got to be kind of in the case of a pastor, really got to be a dad. You got to be a father, and I would think, and you can speak to this as a biological father. There can be a lot of pressure. There can be a lot of pressure, not only because of the very inherent nature of raising a child, but just society's going to tell you what it means to be a good dad. Which I think are some of the same dynamics of being a good leader. We think about the dad as the disciplinarian, or other images of the dad as the, kind of happy-go-lucky, cool dad, and different schools of thought approach it with sort of different ideals in mind. But and here I think is a great connection between leadership and parenthood. You gotta find your way. You got to keep the end in mind, and that is a common goal. In the case of family life, I think it's, to form children into saints for the Christian, or into good people in the case of even virtuous pagans. So you keep the end in mind, and then you got to use your personality, your charisms, your gifts, and you got to be comfortable with that. I don't know if you all can hear. We got the pounding going on above us.
Yeah, it's not a woodpecker. The woodpeckers are out at my house
either.
And Father chased off the barn swallow back to the church.
I did. That was, you know what? I do what I can.
No, I think, what you said is appropriate. And you have to, I think I just was like researching leadership because I wanted to see the breadth and craziness of what all was out there. And I'll be honest, there's stuff all over the place. Yeah. And then there's books, and you want to get into the really weird stuff. There's books about like being a CEO like Jesus.
Yeah, precisely.
And it's like, oh my goodness, this is not helpful.
Page 7, get yourself crucified.
And Jesus said in the Gospel of John, so a pastor needs to do this.
That's right.
It's like, holy cow. And you just have to, I think there's a couple things. And as a dad and just a human being, I think there's a number of things. And I've been in leadership positions, and sometimes there's leadership positions where you're put in a leadership spot, and then there's leaders. Like right. A football team has leadership positions, the captains and the coaches, but then there's actual leaders of the team.
Yep, that's right.
And they're not always the same people.
Absolutely.
And for a variety of reasons. And people will want to follow certain people for a variety of reasons as well. But I think there's some underlying things, especially reflecting as a dad. There's some things that I will never back down on. So I think one of them is humility. Mm-hmm. Biggest one, I think, is humility. If my passions get the best of me, I need to. It would behoove me to apologize.
Amen.
Quickly and repeatedly. Vote early and often.
Amen.
Apologize early and often.
Amen.
As a man. The second one is be comfortable with who I am. And these are not in any particular order, but I have to be comfortable with who I am, because otherwise I'm going to try to be everyone else. I'm going to watch the Jordan series and I'm going to be a leader like Jordan. Or I'm going to watch the Jordan series and I'm going to be, and I cling on to Phil.
Right.
Or I cling on to John Paxson. Or I cling on to Steve Kerr. Or I cling on to
Reggie Miller would be okay. He seems like a pretty cool guy.
Holy cow. Yeah. Talk about trash talk. But I want to cling on to all these people. And that's just impossible. Yeah. You're never going to work. And the last is, now I forgot it, but I wrote down a note here. You have to have a vision.
Yeah.
So you have to have a vision for your family. You have to have a vision for the parish. You have to have a vision. I sent Father this documentary on leadership, and this guy is particularly talking about being a director of movies. And he basically asked the question, it's kind of his own search, because he's trying to be a director, and he wants to be a good director. He wants to be the best. But he's kind of asking, do I have to be a jerk? Because I'm not a jerk. And all the documentary, all the directors I see the good ones,
right, seem
to be jerks.
Yeah.
Or the leaders of companies and whatnot, they seem to be successful because they're jerks. And a lot of, he interviews tons of people, but I think some of those things kind of played out. You have to be humble. You have to realize you have to have a vision. You can't. One of the people in the documentary said you can't make a movie by committee.
Yeah,
because it's just garbage. Yeah. And I think the same is true with a parish.
Yes,
you can't have a parish by committee. You can't be a bureaucrat. You can't run a state by committee. Whatever you are, whether you're elected or you're appointed by the Lord, you have to take some confidence in that. The Archbishop has asked you to be here, or the parish has hired you. Be confident in that. But you got to have a vision, because otherwise my leadership is all over the place.
Yeah,
and
excellent point.
If I'm trying to get people up a mountain, I've led a number of people up mountains. And some of them I've led people up mountains I've never been up. But I've been up mountains before.
Right.
And when I'm going up a mountain, my goal is to get up a mountain.
Yep.
When I'm leading other people up a mountain, my goal is not the same at all. It's to get them up the mountain. And I might have to hoof extra pounds. I might have to carry extra water. I might have to go a lot slower than I normally do. But there's certain things that always are in play. I have to be humble and I have to be patient. I have to have a vision. I have to be able to plan and tell them what the vision is so that they actually care about going up a mountain. Because when you're going up a mountain, especially a 14er, there's 14,000 foot mountains in Colorado. I think there's 50 of them or so.
Wow.
And they're quite difficult. But once you get past 13,000 feet and the oxygen starts going lower, the desire to go up the mountain decreases as well.
Surely. Yeah.
So you're I'm tired.
Yeah.
What's the point of going all up at the top of this mountain?
Right.
And so there's a couple, ways that you can just keep walking,
right?
And hopefully they'll follow you,
right?
You can carry them, like Frodo,
threaten physical violence,
like Sam and Frodo. I can't carry the ring, but I can carry you.
Yeah.
You can help lighten their load, but you have to understand the person. You have to care about them. You have to love them but you have to have a vision. You have to paint this picture that when we get to this place, it's going to all be worth it.
Yeah.
And as a parent, I have to have that same vision, okay, this might be some difficult things I'm going through, but to get to this place, it's all going to be worth it. And I definitely don't have to be a jerk to get there, because what is that? I mean, it really doesn't do anything. It's not very Christian or Catholic at all. However, you could see certain aspects of Jesus' life where you're well, he actually was a jerk right there, but I don't... I don't think you can.
No,
I mean,
I don't think so
I think
either.
on the outside or someone looking in might say, well, that's a jerk thing to do. However, the Catholic Church has these things called the spiritual works of mercy.
Yes, indeed.
That we look at in a different way that help people, like you said, get to heaven. That's my goal. My goal as a father is to get my kids to heaven.
Yep.
And to help my wife get to heaven, and then hopefully they'll drag me there.
Yes,
or they'll pray for me.
Yes, indeed.
So, I mean, it's the same thing. Like, that's my goal. And if I parent without this vision, it just looks like, what's the point, you know?
Yeah.
And then they're halfway up the mountain and they say, I'm tired. What's the point, Dad? And I'm saying, it's all going to be worth it. This is amazing. You know, the view from the top is going to be amazing.
Yeah. That idea of having a vision is so important. I'm so glad you brought it up. And it's as you mentioned, it applies to pastors. It applies to parents. What does Scripture say? That without a vision, the people die. And I do think that's a critical component of leadership. Where do you want to go? And it's something, you know, I'm very blessed here at Transfiguration. I have what we call a parish leadership team. It's a group of staff that I really rely upon, that we meet every single week, and we talk about high level stuff here. We talk about, you know, the vision of the parish, where we want to go as a parish. And I will say that to the degree that we get off of those discussions about vision is where we kind of, you know, where we can have some frustrating meetings because we have to constantly keep our eyes fixed upon the prize. Now, you know, obviously, as Justin mentioned, I've been appointed by the Archbishop. The Lord has called me to be the spiritual father of this parish. I am the decider, as a president once said. But to enunciate the vision, to discern the vision, it is important that leaders surround themselves with those that they can trust, and those who can speak honestly and frankly about what is happening and whether the vision that the pastor or the leader has is a good one. That's very, very important too. But boy, that point about vision, can't agree more. I would also add, and you mentioned this also, to lead people, you have to love them. And this coming specifically as a Christian, as a Catholic, to really lead them, you must love them, because the ultimate goal, of course, of friendship and of relationship this side of the veil is to get to heaven and to order everything towards the community of heaven. And that demands love. It demands love for the other. And as you come to love someone, you come to know them. And it does, you know, certainly it can go the other way too, but oftentimes it goes that way. You love someone, you choose to be there for them. You choose to enter into their life. And when you do that, you can begin to understand them. We here at the parish sometimes have forced fun with staff. And part of that reason...
Yippee.
Exactly. We're going to have fun, damn it. So part of the reason for that is because as we grow in just plain old human community, we come to understand each other, and we come to understand that, gosh, this person is not so different than myself. All that to say that if you are a leader, a Christian leader, you have to understand the people that you're trying to lead. It would do no good if I just had a vision and came in as pastor. I've got to get to know my staff. I've got to get to know my parishioners. And here's where I think, as a pastor, there's a balancing act that the pastor, when he comes to a parish, I would imagine this is similar to a CEO at a business. You come to a place, and the place already has its own culture. It's already got its history. But the man, or the woman for that matter, in the case of a business, has their own gifts, has their own vision. And maybe there are particular problems in that community that have to be dealt with. And it's a balancing act. And I know for parishes, this is something which can be a struggle, because the pastor can come in with his own vision that might sometimes seem, or maybe truly is, at odds with the culture of the parish. And that can raise real challenges. It can also bring about real rebirth as the pastor brings in, you know, a vision that is rooted in prayer and rooted in the tradition of the church. But that's kind of there's some tension there, isn't there, Justin?
Yeah, I've seen it played out on opposite ends poorly, you know, and that's why I think you have to be confident with who you are, and you have to know who you are. You have to know your gifts. I mean, not every pastor is a great homilist. Not every pastor has a gift for raising funds. Mm-hmm. You have to know your gifts and be able to work within them, and you have to be confident with who you are, because you can't. I don't think you can be humble without being comfortable in your own skin.
I think you're right.
Because if you're not, all of a sudden you're trying to make up for things.
Yep.
You know, I'm trying to make up for my lack of leadership by being more strict. You know, I've seen this with dads all the time.
Yeah.
It's like these dads are just not comfortable with who they are, so they're super, super strict. And I think we've seen this with church leaders too, that they're not really comfortable, or they're living a double life, or there's just a lot of other stuff going on. So they have to live this really rigid life,
Yep.
and they have to lead in a certain way because they saw Jordan do it that way. And for goodness sakes, he won 6 rings,
Right.
so I'm going to do it.
That's right.
But
That's
it's
right.
more like, as you were talking, I was thinking of actually the movie Jerry Maguire,
Oh, yeah. Okay.
where, you know, he gives this vision. Have you seen the movie?
It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So he sends out this memo. That's like the beginning of the movie. You know, he sends out this memo, this inspiring memo that actually is inspired by. However, they don't want to lose their job, and they don't want to lose all this money. And it kind of comes to a climax when he leaves, and he says, and this is where it reminded me, he says, like, who's coming with me?
Yeah.
And all these people are like kind of, you know, they're inspired by the memo, but they don't want to jump out there. And then
Sure.
like this one secretary, I forget who it is that actually goes and follows him. But that's, you know, he's confident with who he is.
Yep.
And there was an aspect of humility there, but his vision wasn't going to allow him to just do whatever everyone else was doing anymore, because he was confident enough. And I mean, whatever, it's a movie.
Show me the money.
It's all made up, and it's, you know, whatever. However, I think there's certain aspects of us too. Like, no one wants to go up a mountain with me if they're not inspired by who I am. And I think also a pastor, like, people don't really care what you say until they know you care about them.
No, it's
you know?
very true. It's
like,
very
do
true.
do you actually love me, or are you just trying to like ram a bunch of moral principles down my throat?
Yeah, critical point. And as pastor, it's something which I have to wrestle with every day, because it can be very easy. Just, you know, I mean, it can be very easy. I have a pulpit. I can get up there. I can preach. I can teach, and it's a forum that I'm fairly comfortable in. But as I've said before, frankly, you know, my salvation is not dependent upon some fancy-dancy, you know, homily, as powerful as it can be and as inspired as it can be. I mean, I personally will be saved or be damned based upon whether I loved people, and the people that I'm called to love right now in a very specific way are these parishioners, are you, dear parishioners. So pray for your pastors. Pray that we can really love. Jesus speaks about, you know, the hired hand. The hired hand hears the wolves coming and he runs. We pastors, to be real leaders, we have to stand with the sheep. This is something which another great leader, Pope Francis, has said, that we must smell like sheep. And of course, the point there is that we have to know what's going on in our people's lives. It's one thing that, you know, I've kind of grappled with in recent weeks in my homilies is that, you know, am I really preaching enough about people's real struggles in the home? And, you know, I would ask you, dear listener, if you think that I have or haven't, let me know. We're not going to compose a homily based upon committee, but, you know, the purpose of my homily can't just be for Father Erickson to think about, you know, 5 minutes of Father Erickson's deep thoughts, or if it's Father Johnson, 2 minutes, you know, whatever it may be. You know, this is for the people of God. So all I'm trying to say is that the parishioners have to know that we as parish leadership, and particularly the pastor, loves them. Otherwise, it's all going to fall apart. I can have an awesome vision, but if as you say, if I'm just ramming it down people's throats, it's going to backfire. It may last for 5-6 years even, but it's going to collapse because it was a house built on sand. It was built upon a personality, not upon Jesus, and that's a very important distinction.
Yeah, when there's a distinction too of like, not everyone needs to go up a mountain. Not everyone needs to be a basketball player, and
Thank goodness.
we need to like understand the parameters of what we're doing. You know, when we talked earlier about Jordan just going off on trash talking just in general life, we're losing track of where we're going and what's the point of all this. And the pastor is intended to lead the people to heaven. And like you said, he needs to smell like the sheep. I've heard a number of pastors tell me most of their homilies are just based on interactions with people.
Yeah.
And then just reflecting on it and asking the Lord, what do you want me to say to these people?
Yes, indeed.
I've heard other pastors kind of say, like, some of it's based on just their own personal prayer. What is the Lord speaking to me? And having confidence in the Holy Spirit that that's what the Lord wants to tell them as well. But I mean, a pastor can't just sit in his office and nerd out 24 hours a day and then care and think that the people are actually going to care about that. Like,
Amen.
You're answering questions they're not asking.
Yeah.
And you're trying to lead them up mountains. They don't really care about going up.
The pastor cannot just be a professor. Certainly there's an element to that. We priests must be intellectually engaged. I do believe that. But yeah, we call it pastoral work for a reason, and preaching is pastoral work. I absolutely believe that to be true. That would be a good podcast. How does Father come up with homilies? Maybe we can talk. Maybe we can bring in Father Johnson.
Will that be a short podcast or a long podcast?
Compare notes.
I don't think I ever would have been able to do that one with Father Bear. It would have been just like, I hear the readings 4 minutes before, and then I just go.
And I'm glad you brought up Father Bear, because there's I think a very powerful example of what I believe to be a man who was a real leader. And we saw that in his work at St. John Vianney. I believe we saw that here at Transfiguration. And there's no doubt, as we've preached about before, and I don't think this is disrespectful to anybody, Father Bear was a human being. I mean, and he had real struggles like everybody else. And there were personality faults, just like I've got personality faults. But he also had a very clear vision, very clear vision. And that's exciting. And it's something which people want to rally around. It can also, to getting real here, it can be divisive, because vision, you set up a vision and you say, are you in or are you out? As you mentioned, do you want this mountain or not? And that can be painful at times, but there's no doubt Father Bear had a vision. And speaking just personally, I'm extremely grateful for that vision. It's something which I get to build upon every day with the team that, in many ways, that he assembled. So we pray for Father Bear and for his happy repose.
Yeah, you don't have to talk very long with a Vianney man.
Yeah, that's right.
To know that Father Bear made an impact. But he had a vision. He stuck with it tightly, but he also loved those guys. Yeah. He just loved them, and they knew that too. And I think you saw that with his funeral, with all the stuff that poured in afterwards. These Vianney men, it impacted their lives forever.
Profoundly.
Forever. And in even my life, in the small amount of time I was in the seminary, but also working with him here, there's an inspiration there with a clear vision that, people want to just like hop on. Some people want to just hop on the coattails. Some are, help me, be a leader with you.
Yeah.
I think he empowered a lot of the men at St. John Vianney to kind of be comfortable with the leadership roles they had as well, and kind of form them in that.
Yes.
We're kind of winding down here. Father's got to go repose the Blessed Sacrament, but we want to get some shout outs here before we go. And Father's pointing at me as if I'm the one that's going to have to do them quickly, as if I've thought about them. And he's probably thinking the same thing. He hasn't thought about them either. But we want to shout out some particular things here at the parish. So Transfiguration exists to bring all those in the East Metro to Christ, who is the source and summit of our daily and eternal lives. And we have some kind of benchmarks that we want to shoot for. This is kind of part of our clear vision. We want to be good stewards of Catholic mission. We want to be selfless in our service, and
respect and love. Rooted in respect and love.
Rooted in respect and love. I don't have them written down. I'm just trying to remember. So I want to shout out just all the people who have helped us with the live streams and all the other stuff that's happening, especially the Wanaskases.
Yes.
And Chuck Armstrong.
Yeah. Kyle
Ubel and Jenny Ubel and our cantors who have come in to make our Sunday Mass experience, still a transfiguring experience. So I want to shout out them for their selfless service to our parish. It's been an incredible blessing for us. So thank you, all of them. Father, you got any before we go?
Yeah, in terms of respect and love, I don't want this to sound like a cop-out, but I do think you parishioners, and because you've been so understanding, and certainly we're all wondering, when is this thing going to end? And it's been a long haul, and it's not going to be over for a while. But you've been so compassionate in understanding our limitations as parish staff, and
many limitations.
Exactly, in more ways than one. Just so grateful for your words of encouragement, your words of support, your financial support, which I do want to encourage you to continue to keep going as best as you can. It's been so edifying to see. It doesn't happen everywhere. That there are parishes that are really kind of struggling, and I think that in some sense we have been able to stand fast because of you, the dear parishioners, have remained rooted in respect and love for us as parish staff and for this community. And we're going to continue to offer these shout-outs going forward. Very, very important. As Justin mentioned, part of our visioning is this clear idea of why Transfiguration exists, to bring all those needs met to Jesus Christ, who is the source and summit of our daily and eternal lives. And we're going to continue to hammer that home over and over and over again. But for now, may Almighty God bless you all, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.